It's a very interesting thing because nowadays there is a lot of talk about failures, fail fast, celebrate failures. Is it any different, Gus, from the way you saw failure in the past? And now?
We basically, we never have, when something failed, we never cried.
Okay.
Because if it failed, you got up the next morning, you had to do something else. And I think most successful innovators pretty much work on that basis. And there was an interesting group that we talk about culture and so forth. There was an interesting group of 3M, of 6 people, 6 men, who did a particularly good job on developing a major vacuum system for some of the products we were making. These people never talked to each other. Not that they disliked each other, they just had no reason to talk to one another. Yet they came up with a great, nice product. And the question is, we play a lot, we have to do this, everybody doesn't have to do that. You've got individuals and they have to learn to work together.
So there is a certain amount of management involved.
The management involved, first of all, management has to give the people the opportunity to make mistakes. As we said, you got the opportunity to make mistakes, but with discipline, and don't make them too big.
Yeah.
don't make them too big. Lou Lair, who was president one time, was his face comment. Yeah, we accept mistakes, but just don't make them too big.
Too big.
And don't make the same mistake the second time.
So just for the benefit of our members, so could you take a minute to explain the differences between just general management, project management, and technology management?
Well, we start getting into a lot of discussion on different words and so forth. When management of technology was first brought up, and it was by a professor from MIT who was pushing the concept, his whole concept was that we're educating engineers in engineering. But if you look back at history, who were the engineers? The engineers were the builders. They were the businessmen. They were the people who built the bridges in New York City 150 years ago were businessmen, besides being engineers. And today, most of our engineers are not business-oriented. Matter of fact, many of them just don't like any part of the business. Yet, somebody's got to make that whole system work together.
I think the education is not helping. We have a business school and we have an engineering
school. As a matter of fact, our schooling has even gone worse in the electrical engineering area, because when I went to school, we were taught to be engineers. And today, because I follow the University of Michigan curriculum compared to what I had, compared to what it is today. You can get a double E degree at the University of Michigan and not even know how an electric motor works. How can you design a control system for something that you don't know how it works? And this is very common. All of the courses, such as I had, fluid mechanics, dynamics, and all this, none of that's in the program any longer.
And you're thinking of bringing products which will sell, which people will use.
Right, yeah. How can somebody design circuitry today without some understanding of heat transfer? You have to have a heat transfer engineer sitting next to you to tell you? And the interesting thing at the University of Michigan course, the first 3 years were practically the same for just about everybody.
Syllabus was common across.
Yeah, common across just about all. Mechanical, electrical, with the exception of civil and industrial. Those were different. But in the basic sciences, science-related
topics.
Yeah, they were basically the same.
And how long was this engineering course at then?
4 years.
4 years.
4 years. Oh yeah.
So you could still package it in.
They still packaged it, and keep in mind that those were the days when we had to do drawing by pencil, and our final drawing was one in India ink.
Oh yeah, you had to ink it.
Yeah, and keep in mind also in those days we even used to draw the screw heads on every drawing. So it's totally different. And
but it was more hands-on.
It's more hands-on. And the other thing, I was brought up in what we typically refer to in the United States as the engineering bullpen. 50 desks, 50 drawing tables, 50 filing cabinets, and so forth. And if you wanted to print, you'd yell, "Hey Joe, You got that print?
Relay.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah, I got it, I'll bring it over to you. Now, everybody's in a cubicle. Everybody's in a cubicle, nobody's talking to another, and there for a time, when I came back on one of my trips when I was in Europe, and went to see some of my old friends at 3M, they were all in cubicles. They were talking to each other on the telephone, yet they were sitting right next door to each other in a different cubicle.
And they send mails to the next cubicle.
Yeah, right next door. So, this is kind of ridiculous, really.
There is one topic that brings to the fore now. So over a period of time, technologies change.
Right.
Like in your own career, you were
Right.
explaining how the vacuum tube was your strength and it became redundant when the transistors came. How can technologists and technology managers cope with this changing technologies?
Well, education is the big part of it. When I joined 3M, after about 10 years of experience, the area of process control was changing significantly. And at that time, most of the people who developed those systems were not engineers. There were people who knew how to put things together. All of a sudden you get this new technology that's coming up. So basically, what did we do? Basically, we hired a professor from the University of Minnesota to come in and teach us some fundamentals on process control systems.
So the newer technology.
So new technology. And basically some of the people we had to move out because they didn't want to do it, because number one, they didn't have the skills because it required mathematical knowledge and so forth. But in a company like 3M, you were always able to place people. You didn't have to terminate them at the time. So this was a great opportunity, but we just developed those programs and kept an educational program going.
So the learning aspect is not going to change even now. It's going to get bigger.
Matter of fact, I would think it's greater today than it was in my day. Really.
The rate of change is too much.
Rate of change, right.
So that brings to the other part of the same question. As a technology manager, would you feel it's necessary for the technology manager specifically, to know the technology and that their team is working on?
I think he or she have to have a basic understanding of it. And I'll give you an example. Many years ago, when Cinda Votley was president of EMS, she invited me to a morning session with a group of software people. And I said, why do I want? I'm not a software guy. I said, well, come and join us. So I went, and there were about 10 of those people, 10 of those guys there. And they were all complaining about their managers. And this was just hard to believe that all 10 would be, they're all from different organizations. This is not 10 people from one organization. And I said to them, what's wrong? And basically, little by little, it came out the fact the majority of their managers were MBA graduates. Mm-hmm. Now, I've been a firm believer, and I may be wrong, but this is my idea. If you're going to manage technology, if you're going to manage a group of technology people, you better know something about the technology. You don't have to be a pro, but you at least have to be able to speak the language.
So it's more like a coach then?
It's a coach, yeah, you're a coach. You take the experiences you've had in the past and trying to apply it to a new situation.
So they can amplify their...
Right. And your job is to make them successful.
So now the ability of the technology manager to adopt to new technologies becomes critical then.
This becomes very critical, and the main thing is the people who accept the technology first better be very cautious because it's unproven. So until the technology is proven, people should be very cautious about accepting it.